Hey, RC After Hours community, it's time for another podcast. I actually guess we're on a bit of a roll. We've been getting them out, and this afternoon's guest, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Joshua Orchard. Good afternoon, sir. Actually, Joshua's been wanting to come on the show, and I've been wanting to get him on the show because we've got some concurrent activities, and I guess the timing has worked out just right. So, welcome to the series, sir. Thank you for coming on. We're gonna have some fun. We're gonna definitely put him in the hot seat, the boiler seat, and we're gonna ask him some really good questions because Joshua is a man of alternative materials to our normal crowd. I've seen him do everything from crazy pink foam, wired cut airplanes to some pretty in-depth builds. And we're gonna have a little bit of free time this summer, so we'll talk about that, and we'll definitely dial into some of the more recent news. But without further ado, welcome on board, sir. Welcome to the show, and I guess for all the podcast listeners, give us a little bit of background about who you are, what you do.
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me on, André. It's really a pleasure. I love talking hobby, love talking shop, and it's one of my favorite things to do. So my background, I guess I got back into the hobby about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago. Flew as a kid, started out on control line, flying little Cox planes from Toys R Us, little 049 things, and started, hacking things up and making little balsa control line models, and then eventually tried to get into RC. The entry point was really expensive. I come from a family of 11 kids, so we didn't have a whole lot of money for hobby money. So anything that I did for a hobby was all on my own. And so that's sort of, I guess, where you alluded to my dabbling in alternative materials, just because that's all I had access to at the time. So, I've made floats with saran wrap as a kid and all of that stuff. But yeah, from there, I discovered girls and other things and started to grow up. Got out of the hobby, and, and as I got older and got married and had kids, I kept coming back to wanting to do something not just with my brain in my free time, but doing something with my hands, because I found myself going a little stir crazy. So I started getting back into the hobby mostly through doing real flight airplanes. I would make custom real flight airplanes and met some really great guys online doing that. And then purchased my first RC airplane coming back into the hobby, which was Park Zone Corsair. And then I guess the rest, as they say, is history.
So, actually, we'll touch base on that because we're in a bit of a situation right now around the world, and everybody's in this lockdown pattern, and yep, I full on went stir crazy and needed a release. So I plopped down, what was it? Well, 99 US dollars, and I got Real Flight 9. So it was like almost 140 Canadian. And we've been flying, and we haven't done it this week, but the weather's actually been nice, so I think all of us have been playing and enjoying. But when the weather is not so great, and just that connectivity with everybody, we get onto the chat, we've got our headphones, we're all talking, and we're all bouncing planes off the tarmac and trying to do hovering in 3D and flying things that are ridiculously big for no good reason. But it's that neat little thing, and it was interesting when you started describing some of the stuff you've been doing, and we started getting into the physics and some of the more technical aspects of some of these aircraft, because it's stuff doesn't fly the way you think it's going to fly, and especially in 3D, or not. Sorry, especially in the simulator.
Yeah, the simulator, I mean, it's a funny thing because going from version to version, RealFlight has had some changes in their physics setup, particularly earlier when they went to 4.5 and they had to change to have water feature. There were a lot of physics changes, and like you could sort of cheat and break the system to like do droppable bombs, where you would set the strength of a specific item to be really, really low, and then you could drop something from an airplane that way. Now they have the feature where you can actually do droppable bombs. But yeah, there's other things you can change where you go from real flight 6 to real flight 7, and there's some sort of change in the calculation for center of pressure. And so frequently when you import an older plane from real flight 6 into like real flight 7 or 8 or 9, then you have to fiddle around with your center of pressure modifier, and that way that gets the plane to fly a little bit better. It's just, it's the way it goes. They're trying to make the simulator better, and so you end up having to play with things a little bit more.
A little, and it's funny how quickly I discovered the edit features and was automatically like, oh, I like this airplane at 400% size. So what was it? The EC1500, the E-flite EC1500 as a 400 size foamy is a wonderful airplane. I sat there for like a half an hour, and I think one night we played between myself, you were on for a bit, and then the rest of us, Lewis and Chris and a couple other guys. And next thing I know, I've been sitting on my butt for 4 hours flying RC simulators, and we're just giggling away the entire time. And it was when my wife commented. She says, "I have not heard you laugh like that in a very long time." And it's kind of like, whoa. So $100 well spent as far as I'm concerned. Doesn't matter what transmitter you need. There's so many little interesting hacks. Baloo's on the chat mentions it's too bad it's not available on a Mac. Sorry, man. I know I'm a Mac video editor, but I've got my PC and I built it up, and it's been really good. And I've stretched across 2 monitors so I can see the chat. We found out very quickly early on that the voice chat feature in the system is useless, so we just go either to Discord or even Facebook Messenger and do the audio chat.
Do a call there.
So, and it's
it totally works that way. It's kind of frustrating that it doesn't really work the way you would think it would, but I mean it again, the Real Flight's platform is really quite long in the tooth at this point. I wish they would update it with more modern features, but they're a small Knife Edge is it's a small software company. The software works extremely well. So there's sort of the attitude of, I guess, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But still, it's a great product. I love it.
Well, what was really neat was, even though I was on 9, you guys were linking back to 7 with 7.5, which is kind of nice. And okay, we can't all see each other's aircraft, and the running conversation was, well, okay, if you're going to load a custom aircraft, let us know. We'll start up a Google link page or something, and everybody can at least see each other. And there's certain, and I guess as they add features to their versions, it's, so I've got fields and aircraft that you guys might not have. Of course, all of a sudden I get notes saying, I bought 9, and hashtag blame André, whoops, sorry guys, but you know what?
I mean, for me, the benefits aren't really there for me to upgrade from 7.5 to 9. I just don't see any value in it. I'm like, I'd rather spend that $100 on, parts. 3 receivers for real airplanes. Yeah, exactly. Parts.
Totally.
It's a balance thing. Once they come out with a feature that's really an incentive for me, absolutely, I'm going to buy it. But until that point, I'm completely content with 7.5.
Yeah, and what we learned too, for those who are looking, Steam seems to be the fastest way to get it, because if you go through Horizon and they actually have to send you an authorization, your authentication code. So if you go through Steam, it's like bang, it's automatic. So I'm like, okay, easy peasy, go, and I was up and running in a couple hours. And control wise, I'm using my FR Sky. I had a USB to serial adapter plugged into the trainer port, and I was having all kinds of channel conflicts, and then I found this little application that uses just the audio jack on my computer, and that seems to go. It's called what is it called again? I'm hovering over top of it. Smart Port Pro or something like that. It's a free app, and it just Google it. There's a video on how to do it, and it just goes in there and it listens to it. And I know the FR Sky. There's a USB loader as well that'll let you use your FR Sky to USB, but the audio one works just fine. And so I was able to get like 8 or 9 of my channels. So it's like you can actually go through. And the really funny part is I'm trying to get used to flying with my DX9 Black, and the stock programming for the Spectrum radio everything is on the opposite side of the radio as far as switches and kill. Like my kill switch is where my gear switch is on my, and it's just opposite of what is
Yeah.
on my Tyrannus. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm going to get into some serious trouble one day, because it's going to be like I'm going to be flying a plane and I'm going to throw, go to go with gears and I'm going to throw my throttle lock or something, or it's just I'm
Well,
petrified.
yeah, you have to also remember that the real flight controller itself is modeled after a real Futaba controller,
Oh, that's
so everything is
true.
sort of formatted more toward
Yeah.
Futaba, and the Spectrum and FR Sky, they're modeled more or less toward each other. I mean, the Tyrannus is the case that used to be a JR radio, which is the same company as Spectrum. But at this point, I'm able to use my FR Sky radio through the trainer port onto my Interlink Elite that I have for real flight, so I can use either one.
Yeah.
But I do have a specific profile on my radio,
Yeah.
like selecting a model.
Yeah.
That way, everything is mapped correctly when I go to real flight.
Yep.
It's nice to be able to use my own radio on the simulator.
It is. I've enjoyed that a lot, and it was just you stick. So I have a spare. I've got DX6, and I've got my spare my version 1 of the Tyrannus, and they seem to work really well. So so moving forward, we'll probably be setting up some stuff. There's a lot of speculation, or a lot of if everybody's going to try and do a little real flight action for Flight Fest. We'll talk about that into the show. I guess
See if we can break the multiplayer.
Well, I think it's 32. I think you cap out at 32, right? So.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah.
I've never tried.
No, we've only ever had a couple, but anyhow, as we go, we'll keep it announced, and we'll if we're ever out playing and stuff like that and flying, we'll just throw up a note on social media, and look for the RC After Hours group and everything, and I'll send out the password, which is really easy. So. Let's talk about projects, man. Talk about some of yours.
Sure.
So the first time I met you, we obviously early on. No, I would have to say it was Flight Fest 14.
It was.
It was.
It was.
Okay, so you weren't doing the float plane that year, were you?
No.
No, you didn't do anything.
So that
you had brought in your your SE5. That's what it was.
Correct.
Yes, and
correct.
that got dinged up on the trip.
First time that. Yeah, so I had brought the Grasshopper. I had an L4 Grasshopper that I brought that got a little beat up in Pittsburgh, and that's actually when I first met Chris. I was in one of the build tents repairing it one night and got into a conversation with Chris. But yeah, I had brought the SE5 that I had built from scratch entirely out of foam board, but I had removed all of the paper.
Yeah.
So that I could make it fully scale. And at the time I was covering with tissue paper and water-based polyurethane, and the wings were covered in Doculam. But it had rib stitching and the panel stitching on the fuselage that I had done with, like 150 or something little pins. And Patrick Murphy thought that was just the most amazing thing. And then I started doing airplanes with rivets, and he's like, "You're a lost cause." Yeah, that was a fun year. You and I actually met picking up trash on John Fury's property.
Yep,
that's how we met.
There you go. And it's gone from there. And there's some really good photos in some of the galleries of especially the year you were building the float plane. And it was like, okay, the running joke was, did anybody feed Orchard today?
Yeah, that was a real problem for sure. Yeah, the Sikorsky was a great project just because, we had never encountered the format that Flight Test put on for an event. With the build tents, it was just so unique. And I got so many questions about the SE5 that I thought, I think it'll be more fun to just show people how to build in, something other than hot glue, tape, and foam board. And that's what I did. I didn't bring a single airplane to fly for 2015 and just packed up my entire shop and built the Sikorsky in 50 something hours. It was a lot of fun. No, I won't ever do it again,
No,
but it was
no,
a
no.
lot of fun.
We've all collectively learned some really valuable lessons about bringing crazy projects during that time. And it's not that it's not doable. It's just there are better things to use that time for, I think. And so,
Yeah.
and yeah, so that was a pretty crazy one. The Gotha, that was a fun project too. That was a fun
That was
collective team effort for everybody and the scale and everything.
Yeah, that was actually one of my favorites. So the Gotha, I had been fiddling around with, doing my own flight test style design from scratch, and really I wanted to approach a foam board airplane from the perspective of trying to make it fly in a more scale-like manner, because that's really what I go for. Is I'm a scale builder, so if it doesn't fly scale, it's sort of like, well, if the FT Mustang flies like the tiny trainer, what's the point of
What's the
building
point?
one or the other?
Yeah.
One's a high wing, one's a low wing, but they fly exactly the same to me. But
One lands
people
better.
like the look. Yeah, exactly, exactly. So anyway, the Gotha came out of that, and I saw that Dan Sponholz was trying to do a mini version of his Bloody Baron, and I'm like, hey, this is about the right size to be like a fighter escort. Would you be interested? And he's like, yeah, well, let's do this together. And then it just sort of snowball escalated exponentially out of control, and Steven got in on it. And next thing you know, there's like over 50 pilots on this event, and it was so much fun. Such a
There is
great memory with good friends.
there is an amazing video because Chris puts his Phantom up, and
Yeah.
you see the Gotha, and then we launch, and it's I know my plane missed that Phantom because it went straight up through the chaos, and I'm like, I know it's red.
Yeah, well, those things were so squirrely. People were trying the night before to get them dialed in, and it was like,
Ben,
look, you just no throws, no,
yeah,
no
no,
throws.
no, yeah, nothing. Just and I remember Ben trying to fly his at night and giggling when he got it going, and it's like, yeah, you're gonna lose that thing in like 30 seconds unless you're whipping around your head because they were tiny. And then,
Tiny.
we were doing printed paper and putting that onto rasterized, designed everybody nice, really amazing graphics using the either
Mhm.
your Brit or an Axis or an Ally, and it was really damp. And I remember everybody's planes all the paper just starts lifting off, and even Bixler was just horrified because that year was really bad, and like people would come out, kids had built their airplanes, and they come out the next morning and the planes are all like because they just soaked
Yep.
up all that moisture, right? This is
Yeah, that was all before the
the water
water
resistant.
resistant foam board.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I had flown the Gotha the previous morning just to see how things were doing, what else I need to trim, and boy, I almost lost it. But the following morning, yeah, just as you described, everything was damp, paper was lifting off the Gotha, and I'm looking at it going, well, it'll last for at least one flight,
Yeah.
and that's all it needed.
Yeah. Just got to do a flyby. And you did a bomb drop with it too, right?
Yeah, that was I had designed a bomb drop that was pretty easy just using magnets and a hinge, one of those offset door hinges that you can get, and you put a magnet inside the bomb and a magnet on the end of this hinge, and the hinge lifts up away from the bomb, and the bomb just releases. Super, super easy.
Mm,
But yeah, that was the idea too, to drop a bomb.
nice. And then, so that was what, 2017, I
No,
think?
that was that was 2016.
Right. So
Was
then,
that was 2016,
yeah,
and then 2017
Bugatti.
was that the Bugatti?
Was that the Bugatti? I don't know.
Can't remember. I can't
I think
remember.
so because after last and then it was 2018 your role at Flight Fest changed and we can discuss that for sure, but
Yeah.
I think the Bugatti because then afterwards we all got a little bit more serious about certain things. Yeah. being told by various sources it was 17. So
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so 2017 was then the Bugatti, which was crazy. That was my first sponsored build, which was really cool. It was really great collaboration with Ian at Hobby King, and I'm really pleased with how it turned out. Still hasn't flown since that flight, but certainly not without trying. One of the many things people don't realize about that airplane, I've had so many people ask about it over the years, is that the center of gravity is only 1 centimeter ahead of the wheel axle line when it's on its mains. So anytime any
oh
sort of bump happens,
yeah,
it wants to nose over.
yeah, yeah.
We tried at CEF the following year, and I had come with 8 propellers, and I broke all
All
8 of
eight.
them, plus the 2 that were on the airplane. So
Yeah.
again, it wasn't without trying, but the only way the Bugatti's ever going to fly again is if I get it on tricycle gear.
Mm,
So
that would yeah. Or you find a perfect runway for it. So ooh.
yeah. I mean, people have talked about trying to do a paved runway, and I've got one down the road here at another club that I could go to and try. But it's such a scary airplane. At this point, I haven't even thought about flying it for so many years that
Yeah.
it's like, well, I'd really have to psych myself up to get it out there.
Interesting.
Yeah, anyway, I loved that build. Completely scratch built. I did all of the aerodynamics and everything behind it. Did a lot of research. It was a lot of fun. Big
Beautiful. And it
learning
looked
experience.
it looked beautiful. And I guess from there, I don't remember if you did anything for 18 and then 19 you
I did.
had. What did you do for 18?
18, I did the Corsair.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay. I was
Yeah,
I was probably a
Corsair.
little bit more
Corsair.
focused.
Yeah, yeah, you were. Yeah, the
Oh, your
Corsair was an
audio is
exercise
slipping a little
in
bit.
smashing
Well,
one mod. Oh, I'm sorry.
hold on here. Yeah, it looks like your
How about
connection's
now?
all right, hold on. Give it a second. Give it a second. See if it comes
Yeah.
back. All right, try it now.
All right, so how's that sound?
That's a little better. Yeah.
Okay. So the Corsair was an exercise in stuffing as many RC gimmicks into one model at one time. I had this top flight 60 size Corsair that I had purchased from a club member, no kidding, for $20. Uh, so I was like, well, everybody likes the Corsair, and it's been a while since I've done a proper balsa build. So I just got excited about building in balsa, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to go crazy. This whole 3D printing thing is taking off. So I did a bomb drop mechanism, and so it can drop 2 bombs. It's got a functioning pitot tube that tells me airspeed, full house retracts with Robart pneumatics. It's got the functioning cowl flaps. It's got a 3D printed dummy radial, 3D printed spinner, 3D printed exhaust, and then you get into the cockpit, and the cockpit slides
I remember that.
and
Yeah.
stick moves forward, back. Moves and the rudder pedals move, and there's a boost tab on the elevator that's functional, and yeah, I mean, it does everything. It's heavy and it flies. It flies heavy, but it flies well. Um, and I've had that out to several events at this point. Love the
Nice.
Corsair. Nice flying
Nice.
plane.
Nice. And then for 2019, it was
Yeah.
the pop rivet craziness, and
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean the P4 the sorry the Corsair had its fair share of rivets and panel lines, but the P47 was something special. Yeah, I love that plane. I don't know
so
what's your favorite part about the P47.
I loved. It's like I said, it's the alternative. The idea of saying, I'm going to take a roll of duct tape, not duct tape, sorry, insulation tape, foil tape, and then I'm going to figure out if I can polish this thing to a mirror shine, and then I'm going to put this all over that aircraft, and then you're going to apply a million, a couple. You counted them, didn't you?
I did. I can't remember the exact number, but it was like 13,000, 14,000.
And
Yeah, I row and I put it in a spreadsheet and then just sum the whole column.
yeah. And it's just the fact that it looked different because you had Carl's airplane, which was basically stock, and then you had yours, and just from a visual standpoint, and so you put your stamp on it, which is and then you put a stamp on Finley.
Touche.
Touche.
Uh,
Yeah, but
yeah,
I mean,
I mean the point that you make is a really good one, and that was what I was trying to do from the start. Because at the time that I started that project, there was all this talk online about how builders were dying, and that we need more builders, and we need to promote the hobby more. And I looked at the situation and I said, okay, well, I'm a builder, and what do other people really look at when they try to approach a build? And I thought, well, I mean, ARFs, you really can make your own.
yeah.
And that's why I called it a BARF, builder's ARF. Name didn't really catch on, but who cares? Anyway, I had looked into the covering that most people do called flight metal, and researched it, and found all these specifications on it, and I was like, okay, well, it comes in this roll. There's got to be commercial availability for it somewhere else, and I just happened to find it on Amazon for half the price. And it's just this roll of 6-inch wide foil tape that's essentially aluminum ducting tape. This stuff is ever so slightly thinner, but it works just as well. And then I just figured out how to polish it.
That was
made a
awesome.
made a holy mess in my shop, let me tell you.
Oh, I know. I remember doing chrome on the GT6, and like you come in and your hands are, even though you had gloves on and everything you're black. You're just black
Yeah.
from that compound.
Yeah.
So is it an iron-on application then?
No, not at all. I did a 3-part series on it on my YouTube channel where it's a lot of it is in the surface preparation.
Yeah.
So you've got to eliminate the grain of the balsa wood, and you've got to give it a nice even surface for this tape to adhere to. It's like a natural rubber almost, adhesive that does cure out. So if your surface prep isn't right, then you're going to show anything that's underneath of it.
Yeah.
Once the glue cures and you try to peel it up and correct it, it's gonna rip everything apart as you try to peel it off. So it's really important that you get it right the first time and then just leave it alone.
So
But yeah, it's metal. It is raw aluminum that you have
nice.
to stretch and form and plan ahead, and you have to overlap just right to get the panel lines to look good. And if you mess up, you mess up. But that's part of the fun, is learning how to work with a new medium.
So did you took the P47, the Hangar 9 P47? Did you strip
Yeah.
off the covering that they had?
I did. It was, if I recall correctly, it was almost 11 ounces of covering. And I did that was my first time lapse video on my YouTube channel. But yeah, that was a lot of work, and it really hurt my fingers. So if you ever do it, you've been warned. It's not for the faint of heart, because that covering in particular, that printed stuff, is more like a vinyl.
Mm.
So when it gets heat, it holds it really well. Unlike well, you've been stripping off the plane in your background.
Yeah. But that's a
You're
fabric based.
Yeah, but even still, doing the covering that you're doing, it doesn't hold the heat like this vinyl does.
Yeah.
Like when you're applying stuff, and you're applying heat with either a heat gun or an iron, it's just not going to hold the heat like this stuff does. So my fingers were burned and very raw.
Yeah,
after.
and then I can imagine when you're putting the stuff back down, I mean, you're basically heating a heated surface as well, so twice as much.
Well, no, I'm not using any heat to apply the
That's right,
aluminum.
because it's got the adhesive already. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
gummy. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you just have to be careful when you're running your finger across seams. That I mean, I'm serious. That the aluminum will cut you really
up.
bad.
Yes.
I bled on that project. I bleed on almost every project.
Awesome. And it's funny because, Joshua firsthand, like I'm in the middle of doing my biplane, and there are photos there when I started doing the top wing, and I haven't done covering in like 20 years, and I'm sitting here going, okay, I know how much this silly roll of material costs me, and I'm petrified to start the first cut, because no matter what you do, you've got to cut it. You've got wastage. It's a highly inefficient way to do it, because no matter what you do, you end up with slivers and chunks and pieces. Don't throw those away, because they can be used for something somewhere.
That's right.
But I was just like, you got to start. And I will never call myself OCD. I will never say I'm like compulsive, but I was like, oh, I'm going to screw these corners up. And after a while, I had to let go and say, you know what? It's going to be what it is. I mean, it didn't turn out that bad. It's sitting behind me, and I'm kind of happy. The corners, whatever. I can put some other stuff over top, some black over top, and But for my first time doing covers and figuring it out, and it was talking with other people, yourself and some other people, I need to do more stretching and just plan that out a little tiny bit more. But it's like I'm doing the cut, and I'm like, okay. And you watch some videos of people doing this stuff and prepping for it, and they've got a mirror, and they put down their spray, and then they get there with their really high refined knives. I'm like, no, let's go. Because I'm like,
yeah,
it's a plane. Like, okay, fine. Someone is going to go, oh, you could have done a better job. I'm like, you know what? Once that thing is in the air and it's 10 feet out, you ain't going to see those flaws. You're going to be smiling and going, holy crap, it's a beautiful plane.
That's exactly the point. You're the average kind of pilot / builder that, the average person is just going to be completely content with, less than perfect covering job. I'm different because I admit that I get pretty obsessive compulsive about some things, and that's what I enjoy about the hobby. I enjoy seeing an airplane on the ground as well as in the sky, because to me, when I look at an airplane, it's really fun to go to events and see an airplane like, oh, that's really neat. And then you go back a couple hours later and the sun has arced and changed and you can see different details. That's really fun for me. Yeah. And so I try to plan those kinds of things into my builds, because every once in a while you do encounter another weirdo like me. But for the most part, everybody's, one and done. They're like, oh, I've seen that.
Well, and so it's interesting, because as I progress through the hobby, I have a litany of airplanes, and I really appreciate the fact that you can say, okay, 1, maybe 2 projects a year maximum, 1 or 2 planes a year, and I got sucked into the bind and flies, and I've also decided I like the bigger airplanes, and it's terrifying. It's a terrifying problem.
Bigger flies better.
Oh man,
bigger flies better.
So in behind, it's out of the scene. But anyhow, I was working on the 262, the Dynam, and I had to move 5 airplanes to get to 1 airplane. I'm like, I need to scale down, unfortunately, because everything is bigger. And once this project is done, and once we know we can go flying again, I want a Cub. I want a gas-powered Cub. I don't know about the gas, actually. I don't know if I'm going to go fuel-based or if I'm just going to stick with electric. But I want my first Hangar 9 experience. I know what I can fit in the car. I know what I'm looking for, but I've also got to be prepared, because boy, oh boy, this stuff costs money. So I can appreciate why you say, okay, I'm going to focus in, because I know what the dollar value is on that P-47, and then I get Canadian value and stuff. So it's a little terrifying. And then I'm like, This is a hobby. And I look back to 2013 and what I was flying on, what I was flying with, and the budget. And I'm like, wow, this escalated fast.
Yeah. Yeah, it's no secret. It's really not a secret. Everything is published out there on what it is. And actually, Carl Leidig, he's done a great review on the P47. And everything as built with all the recommended hardware, including servos and retracts and everything, it's $1,400
US.
And US. That's expensive.
Yeah.
That is expensive, and there's no doubt about that. If you look at all the materials and other stuff that I put into the P47, it's not a whole lot much more. It's just the time.
Yes.
There's a lot of time investment in that airplane.
Yeah.
Even after I flew it into Mike Finley, it grazed him. Mostly
good.
it hit the planes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I still get flagged for, but whatever.
He did a nice tuck and roll.
He did. Well, and a lot of those people that criticize it don't really understand the nature of Flight Fest and how the FlightLine goes.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that, buddy.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. Robert posts. He says, "Yeah, $2,000 Canadian," and it's tough because I can afford it. The question is, do I want to afford it? And it's just as you progress with the hobby, you change what you want. So I mean, my Waco project behind me, that's a massive change. I mean, okay, the darn airplane cost me $75 to buy used. And then all the other gear. I can tell you, when I'm done, this thing will probably be $1,000 airplane by the time I'm done. And and I got a smoking deal on an original kit that's in really fantastic shape. I just have to put the time into it. Now, what you say about the time and what you say about that work, borderline zen, especially during the middle of the winter, and even now when what we're going through right now with the COVID-19 stuff, and just like there are days when the weather's crap outside, or I've had it, and I'm like, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna work on this airplane, and I've been knocking down pieces on it bit by bit, little by little, at my pace, but I've been doing it when I want to do it, and I think that's a big change. And as much as I love working with foam board, there's no way I have the skill set to curve and do stuff like overstreet. I've tried, and I get it because I've watched and I've worked with metal and everything, and I'm like, I can't make this thing this shape. I have no idea. So I'm like, you know what? I'm trying this medium, and I've accepted the fact that when I make an RC plane out of foam board, it's boxy.
Well, you can. It's fun too because you can approach the balsa building with incorporating foam as well. There have been airplanes in the past where I've crashed, and take for example I've got a Great Plains Escapade, and I had a little brownout, and the airplane went into. So this past summer we had this corn, and I'm talking like 9 foot tall corn. So I had a brownout on takeoff. And I've since fixed that issue. But what happened was the airplane, I tried to safely bring it down once I recovered signal. I mean, it happened in a split second. But the whole leading edge just got kind of banged up.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of cracked spots of wood. Well, I just popped those out and then popped in a little piece of foam.
Yeah.
Carved it down, sanded it to shape, put covering right over top of it.
Yep.
Flies great.
It's amazing.
Flies great.
It's an amazing medium, right? I mean, and that is the fun of it. And there's a statement here from Jermaine, who says it adds up fast when building and restoring airplanes. It sounds crazy too, but I also love finding a good used deal. I mean, this is a restoration on someone else's job. This plane is 20 years old, we figure. I'm the third or fourth owner at this point. And that's fantastic. And so finding something now, you're still putting in the money because servos on this scale, no one told me about that either.
Yeah.
When
to be fair, you went a little bit overboard on servos there, and I warned you about that.
Okay.
It It is insurance though,
Yeah.
so I'm not gonna criticize you for that at all. But yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you with the tri-pacer in the background. The restoration. I've never done a restoration before. I've only had ever done builds from beginning to finish. But at the same time, it's like, how much of my shop supplies are going into this airplane that I'm not accounting for? Because at this point, I haven't really put any money into the airplane. It's just all of the shop supplies that I've got. I bought the airplane for $50 at a swap meet, and I paid $45 to have a brand new cowl. That's it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem like much on the surface, but boy, there are some interesting things underneath that covering.
Yeah, it's like when you dig into a restoration on an old car, you're like, ooh, what did that guy do? Previous owners, DPOs we sometimes.
Fire it that way.
Yeah. He used what? How much Bondo? But in this case, like I said, my biplane's in relatively good shape, and I'm having fun. And the previous owner's actually become a pretty decent friend, and I've asked him questions, and I'm going to be doing a 3D print prop for him. And he's like, "Oh, I found the decals, and oh, here's a bag of vinyl covering, because he was actually a little insulted that I was like, I'm going with the Ultra Coat, and he's like, oh, you should have used a fabric, and I'm like, it'll look cooler, and it's my learn. I didn't even know you could get the fabric stuff that was just iron on, but now I know, and so yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of different coverings out there, and there are pros and cons to everything. I've built everything from World War One aircraft to Golden Age to World War II, and now this is my first civilian airplane. Oh well, I shouldn't say that. Sikorsky was my first civilian airplane, but this is my first civilian balsa plane. Put it that way.
Yeah.
But there are so many different fabrics out there, and while there are things like Oratex, which I mean I'm using Oratex on the tri-pacer, but my past has been with Solartex.
Yeah.
And let me tell you that the stuff is heavy.
Yeah.
It's a heavy covering, and unless you're building something big, you really can't use it on something smaller. I tried using it on a 1/6 scale World War One airplane. I had to rip it all off of the fuselage because there was so much weight on the tail that I was having. No, I had to put literally a half a pound of weight in the nose just to offset the weight in the tail. And because it's short nose coupled, you had to add a lot of weight. So again, there are pros and cons to different things, but that's again why I love building and why I love talking shop with people, because you learn these things, and not everybody has access to resources, and I've taken so much time trying to learn and get all this information, and that's why I share everything that I know on my YouTube channel. I have no secrets. I will not hide any secret from anyone. And I've met builders that will not tell you a building technique because it gives them like a competitive edge on something, and I'm like, hey man,
are you doing this for
well,
yeah, so
I don't fully understand.
There is some competitiveness if they're doing for shows and that. I could appreciate that, but yeah, no,
Sure.
That's not the part of the community that we're from, so
right.
It's
right.
Bill Decker asks a really good question. Monocoat, is there a difference between monocoat and ultracoat? I think
there is a difference. It is one is coming from the Great Plains, and one is coming from Horizon Hobby.
Mm-hmm.
But if I were to have to choose one over the other, I would honestly use ultracoat. I think personally it holds up better over time, and just from the planes that I've observed from going to swap meets and stuff, yeah. I mean, the Ultracoat just shrinks really well. I mean, look at that finish that you've got, Andre. It's great.
It looks awesome. I was so excited. Here, I'll get close to the microphone again. Put my wing back. That's the big one too. That's the 72-inch one.
Yeah.
The lower wing is smaller. Yeah. I was so excited to finally. I was trying to get photos of this thing because I was like, man, the camera with the overhead light and the LED was like green. I'm like, I gotta get this thing outside to take a photo. And the pop, the
Yeah.
visual pop, and the camera does no good job at capturing it. And so, well, what really struck me was the difference between the control surfaces and I tried to cover them, but they've got the wings of their whether they're graded or whatever. I tried putting a cover on it and I couldn't get the define, so I'm like, all right, I'll have to try and paint match or just paint it with an accent color. But from my experience, go ahead.
Yeah, but the other thing I was gonna say is that you'll find that once you get the airplane in the sun, that the covering is not nearly going to be as likely to bubble as monocoat, because the adhesive, the heat activated adhesive, is a little bit different as well.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I found. Like the great airplanes that I have built, like the GB R1 that I just finished.
Yep.
I built a Ryan STA for another club member earlier in the winter, and both of those planes I hit them with the covering iron and a heat gun to get everything tight. And the second they're in the sun, everything starts to bubble up.
Yeah.
And you don't see that nearly as much with the Ultra Coat.
Yeah, it surprised me because it was like, ooh, I was a little excessive on my cover. I'm like, okay, let's just. And I think I only had one burn through on the leading edge, and that was on the first layer. So I was like, okay, I'm fine because I can cover over, right?
Nobody's gonna see it.
Well, exactly. And then
and
it's not perfect, but then I was like, you know what? If anybody scowls on me, this is like, look, first time in 20 years, people. But it looks from the top end of it looks great. No one's gonna see the underside of my wing. If they do, well, I've run into them. But
yeah.
The fuselage will be interesting because that's where I'm going to have to pay attention to detail. I am going to have to go over with some filler and just clean up a couple areas because that you want it to look nice. I'm not sure how I'm going to attack the battery hatch yet, how I'm going to clean up those edges, but I've got enough material here. I went and I bought an extra roll. Hopefully the color matches. It should. Either way, yeah. But like I said, if I can't, things like the wheel pants and the cowl, if I can't get a color match done, well, maybe I'll paint them in an accent color and make it my own plane, like there's no rule.
I'll tell you about a conversation I had years ago. I went down, so I'm fortunate to live near Washington, D.C., right near the Smithsonian area, and I went with Carl and Patrick, two of our buddies, down to the Udvar-Hazy Museum on a day that they had an open house for the restoration hangar.
Nice.
I had a half an hour long conversation with a gentleman about paint. Let me tell you, I love talking paint. And the thing that I learned there is that if you want to try to recreate an airplane, the only way that you can do that is if you take one picture at one time that covers every single detail of the airplane.
Yep.
Everything else, you can fly that airplane an hour later and
Yep.
it'll look different.
Yep. Anything
can happen. So, your yellows not matching, I wouldn't be worried about because you're going to have that happen on a real plane. Like Patrick's full-scale Tri-Pacer.
Yep.
He's had the wings recovered, and the wings and the tail look ever so slightly whiter than the cowl around the engine, just because it's metal and it's been painted. So you're going to have these kinds of discolorations. And again, different times of the day are going to show different colorations.
Yep.
So don't sweat those kinds of details, because to me, I think it looks like it has more character, and I think they look better when they have those kinds of interesting things to look at.
Oh, and I decided very early on that I wasn't going for perfection on this airplane. Actually, I was almost I know I had to go and look under the skin and take the skin off and everything, but I was almost upset with myself after because I'm like, I bet I could have gotten this airplane to fly sooner, but at this point,
Yeah, I mean, you can say that all that you want, but at the same time, you're going through it so meticulously that you're going to know every
Everything.
single piece about this airplane. So if anything ever happens to it, you're going to have that brain say, I know how to fix that.
Yeah.
And
And
that's the advantage that you have of going through the whole process of the restoration.
and I'm enjoying it. It's interesting. It's a whole other set of tools. It's a whole other set of things. I had to cut the battery hatch into it and everything, and I had to think about that going, okay, top
You were
access,
so
but
nervous about that.
it's like, okay, and you're like, don't even measure it. Just get in there with the knife. You and Carl, like, just cut it. Get your saw and go. And that's what I did one afternoon. I just went, okay, and then I'm like, okay, the battery, and then we studied this piece of wood that the previous owner put in there. And I'm like,
Not
Chris,
structural. Not...
well, it was structural because he had a big giant, was it SATA? Big giant, 4-stroke motor in the thing, right? I'm going to be running off a 430 kV with a 16-inch prop and everything. I'm not going to have the same dynamic craziness going on inside this airplane. So it's like, okay, we can take a little leeway. We can go back and forth. It'll be interesting to see if I make the CG, if I have to add weight to the nose, but I think I should be pretty good. I mean, I've got my large size motor mount, which I've got to do like you and chop up and everything, and it's an interesting process in that, yes, we admit it costs money. Yes, you have to sometimes do things that are a little radical, like take your brand new $40 motor mount and hack it right away.
Yeah.
But you make it on your own. So, André, it will take you longer to finish it than to maiden it. Yes, it will. Only because I don't get to go flying for a while. Yeah, and I'm bad for me taking up brand new airplanes right away. I tend to, for whatever reason, they tend to wait. But it's funny because I'm pretty bummed about 2020 because obviously 2018, the end of 2018 was a disaster. 2019 was a bit of a recovery, and I'm like, okay, let's go. 2020, we're ready to rock. And I've got a bunch of airplanes I was ready to fly and everything, and the winter was long and everything, and all of a sudden, yeah, we're all stopped, and unfortunately, so it's funny because I almost wanna tag all the suppliers I know, Flight Test, even Motion, and anybody who sells kits, and see how their stock is. Are people, because I know you guys still have access to your fields, but a lot of people, I'm understanding, like, we can't fly in the parks, we can't fly at our flying fields, so I'm almost wondering how the builds are going.
We're kind of an exception in that we rent property from a private landowner. So because it's not public property, we can still utilize it. And obviously we do have to still maintain it as part of our lease agreement. But our club is such a small club. Last year we only had 32 actively paid members. Usually it was the same 5 guys at the field every weekend.
Nice.
Yeah. So even if we had a big group, it would be like 6, 7 people.
Nice.
So it's like there's plenty of room to go around, and honestly, it's a beautiful place to fly to where we are. The runway is terrible because it's old farmland, but it's.
I watched one landing, and the perspective was like the plane. Maybe it was the Jug. It was the Jug, yeah. And I remember watching it, and it was just like you're coming in, and it's like it slopes down away from you, and I was like, wow. Or it could have been the perspective of the angle of the camera, but it looked.
Maybe a little bit of both, but yeah, the field is sort of like at the crest of a hill. And so it does go down slightly on both sides. But on the right side of the field, it's interesting. You have to sort of like really buck up for your first flight because that right side of the runway can either have, and you don't know until either someone else has gone up for the day or if you go up. So it's sort of like, okay, well, the first thing I'm going to do on this pass is figure out, does that spot have sink or lift?
Yeah.
Because it can make it landings interesting.
Yeah.
Especially if you're coming from the right.
Well, we've got something somewhere with our place where we've got the line of trees, and yeah, that'll do stuff. Or the wind will cut funny coming in, so you're coming in, and all of a sudden wings are doing stuff on final and everything. Phoenix or Perfection says my local hobby shop is killing it right now in Surface RC. Totally. If I'm staying home and I'm stuck in my yard this year, oh, that Carla course. And if anybody's looked at my social media, my parents dropped off this. They took down a tree and they had all these flagstones around it, and so that has now been hauled over to my place and is part of the crawler course. I flew in the backyard though. I have from Jason, one of our buddies here in Ontario. It's a Fat Hawk. It's a 3D. It's a simple 3D 2S with a little prop saver motor set up and everything. And I flew 3D in the backyard. I landed in the hot tub twice. I had the cover off because I was just cleaning the tub vent, and I plopped the stupid 3D plane in there. But it's Depron, it's foam, right? So you pick it up, shake it off, or throw it back in the air. So if I'm like, okay, if this keeps up, I've got a ton of resources. I've got a ton of parts here besides the projects that I'm working on right now. I want to make a little backyard flyer. I've got my little FPV aircraft, and it's funny because everybody's like, just fly the quads. I'm like, nah, that's cheating. That's cheating. I want a plane. I know I can get my little my Vapor, my FPV Vapor to fly around, and I've flown some other airplanes. I've got my really nice Cub. My Cub S back here. I don't want to bang that thing up on the 1S because it's that light foam. So I'm thinking if I can make something that's got, and it's all about the wing surface, the lift, and if I can slow down, if I can get those props, big enough props spinning slow enough that I can just kind of crawl along, and then a really good rudder authority and just map out the place and just go. And so that's what the 3D plane was showing me, because if I got in trouble, I just pop into a hover, turn it around and come back. And I was like, okay, that worked great.
Yeah. I mean, as long as I've been flying at this point, I always say that I'm a fair pilot. I'm getting better, but I'm a fair pilot. But the 3D stuff, I just, my head cannot do that.
That little bit of time, honestly, the little bit of time sitting there in real flight and with Chris in my ear saying, okay, try this. And he's pump it, a little bit of right aileron. And it was like, all of a sudden,
you saw me in real flight. I can do it in real flight all day long. It's like, when I get to the field with a real airplane, I'm like, I'm not doing that. Are you kidding me? I'm not doing that. But another airplane I've been flying the snot out of recently is from Hobby King, is the MXS R70, and it's roughly a 60 size airplane. But I've been learning to fly IMAC. For those who don't know. International Miniature Aircraft, it's basically scale aerobatics, and they do competitions. And my club president is the regional IMAC director here, and I've been getting great coaching from them. And let me tell you, learning to do those maneuvers and try to make an airplane do something very specific is difficult. It's very, very difficult. So I have a greater appreciation, but I do think that it's making me a better pilot. It's making me plan ahead, making me think ahead of the airplane and how to better fly the wing, not necessarily the prop. A lot of I forget the plate airfoil. What's that called again? Klein-Fogelman. The Klein-Fogelman wing airplanes. It's a lot like the flight test airplanes where you've got the undercambered tips, and it's gonna go, and you're more or less using the prop to make the airplane go where you want it to. With IMAC, it's completely the opposite. You want to use the prop as a control surface, just like your rudder, and it's challenging. It's really, really challenging.
So are you running a constant? It's a course, right? Like it's like you're running a pattern.
It's a sequence. Yeah, there's a sequence of maneuvers that you're supposed to do in a specific order. I haven't bothered to print out or learn the 2020 basic sequence yet, because I'm still trying to learn the 2019 basic sequence. But I look at that situation, I'm like, okay, well, if I had like an ultra micro extra with AS3X, and I I had a whole litany of 1S batteries, I could probably fly that in my backyard.
Yeah.
But I couldn't fly 3D. And that's the thing I'm having right now. So, surface doesn't really interest me, but the ultra micro stuff is starting to appeal a little bit more now that I have a little bit wider backyard.
Yeah.
But I don't know how the new neighbors will take to that.
It's small. It's small. I don't they have a little, yeah, they've got to have something that'll work. So, it's interesting in that, if I can get a couple of these, I might fly some of them out in the front yard. I've put planes in trees before, even 1S planes. So they just seem to get attracted to my airplanes. But if I can get something in the backyard, if I can design something, with it's got to be durable because there are plenty of things to hit. And, the pool, the shed, the deck, the side of the house, the fence, the trees.
The neighbor's dog.
Yeah, the neighbor's dog. Yeah, no, there's enough of a barrier between all the trees that I should be okay. But what I've also learned in the last 2 years of flying in the backyard, whenever I do, the channels between the two houses are terrible on little 1S planes because it's just this wind barrier, right? This wind, and you come around the corner, you got it, and all of a sudden you're hit. So it's just finding an airplane that's got a powerful enough rudder that you can turn and get it back under control, and that's where that little UMX is. The little Vapor is hilarious. The FPV Vapor, because it's actually a faster aircraft, I think. I haven't tried the HP one, but I think that would just get blown away. It's too tiny. It's so tiny. So I'm curious about the Cub, but I haven't flown that one in a while. And it's like, I can't even get out to the park. So it's like, you need floats. Yeah. Bill Decker says you need floats. I said, well, if I'm flying, I'll put the cover on the pool because then I can touch and go. Interesting comment from Lee Davis. He's saying that he's now flying. He's been enjoying the new A10. Are you much of a jet guy, an EDF guy?
No. I have. Let's see. I want to get this precisely correct. I have built exactly one EDF. I have purchased one EDF. So years ago, I purchased a HE163 Salamander. I think that's what it was called. Anyway, it was molded wrong from the factory, and it didn't have any rudder controls on it, and so I threw it up there and it flew in circles because I had no rudder authority. It's just the way it was molded from the factory. And on top of that, it came with only 2 right wings. So I had to reach out to Hobby King and get this. I mean, this is way back long, long ago when the quality of Hobby King was really, really not what it is now anymore. But also, so the other EDF that I've flown is Ben's F-16. And my reason for that was I wanted to investigate how building in a flight test style would work if you were to strip all the paper off and then cover it in fiberglass. What does the weight look like? What does the longevity look like? And my problem that I had was pretty much the same as what I had experienced with paper. It's so humid. A lot of people don't realize Washington, D.C. was built on a swamp, okay? It is moist here. And the F-16 warped pretty badly after not too long. So I was just like, okay, well, I am not planning to make any more flight test style airplanes because they only last me for about a week.
Yeah.
And then they warp or fall apart.
Yeah.
I don't care how water resistant Josh Bixler tells me that foam board is. I'll show you how water resistant that foam board
Well,
is here.
I think the humidity also affects the glue because I've had things pop that
Yeah.
I'm like, why is going? I've had wings come apart, but it could have been my glue too,
Yeah.
my gun,
Well,
right?
and that's the other thing too. Some people say, "Oh, I've never had Gorilla Glue expand the way it does, the way you show in YouTube videos." So I'm like, "Do
Uh,
you realize moisture is in the air where I live?"
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that is very true. That is very true. Bill Decker posed a question. He said, "Have you ever flown? Have you ever flown anything from Flex Innovations?"
I have not.
Hmm.
I have not. I've talked with the Flex guys a lot, um, and that conversation really started in 2018 when I first went to CEF, and I actually picked up the Aura 8 that I have. I picked it up from them because I picked it up specifically for the Bugatti to try
Mm.
to get the Bugatti to play nice, and um, never really got a chance to never got a chance to fly the Bugatti with the Aura 8. Um, but the thing I will say is that the Flex guys really know their stuff. They make really nice flying models from what I can see, but they don't do anything scale.
No.
So that's my issue with Flex is I don't have any interest in them because I'm a scale guy.
Well, maybe
So
that new F100, that lovely EDF,
it's an
but
EDF.
yeah,
It's an
yeah,
EDF.
yeah,
I'm like, I don't really do EDFs.
yeah.
If it doesn't have a prop on it, it's it's another jet. They
Yeah.
look all the same.
Well, it no, and I'm gonna agree because I love the classic retros, and even when I do have a jet, it's got to have a little age behind it. It's I prefer something that's been around for a while. It's just they look nicer. I can't stand a lot of the modern stuff. It's too sharp and too elegant and everything. It's something about an old airplane that's bulky and beefy and um
Yeah, Hilda Flyer in the chat pointed out, peel the paper, fiberglass the foam, and that's exactly what I did with the F-16. I just want to point that out. I
mhm.
fiberglassed it, but I didn't use epoxy. I used sanding sealer, which is the same thing as water-based polyurethane, by the way.
So you just
The
sucked it
reason,
all in.
yeah, but it's also a little bit lighter than using epoxy resin, and that was the whole point. It's like, okay, if I'm going to build a jet, I can't build it with epoxy because I got to save the weight,
Yeah.
and I'm just not. Yeah, sorry, Dave. Love you, love your builds, but yeah,
Different environment,
yeah,
different environment. Oh,
yeah.
and
Well, yeah, he's up north. He understands.
well, this is it, and it's funny because everybody, I've flown a lot of my flight test planes in the winter, and it's you knock the snow out of it and they're fine, but it's like as soon as spring comes along, it's like nope, those go away because as soon as I land on that grass, and even Flight Fest last year, the first thing in the
Yeah.
morning, it was so damp, and like you were just like no foam plane, like give me I'll fly my little Sky Hunter because when that touched down, it's like yeah, it's like a soaking football.
Well, that's the other thing too. That you get the advantage of larger airplanes. There are lots of other different construction techniques with foam that work quite well, where you don't have to worry about the moisture content. I've seen many builds where people will build the main structure from foam, and then they'll sheet it with balsa wood, and
Okay.
then they'll cover it in a light finish of fiberglass just for having a nicer surface to paint on. And what's nice about that is number one, you can leave it in the sun and the foam isn't going to outgas and wrinkle. We've seen that on Carl Leidick's quarter scale P40,
Right, I
where
remember that.
right,
Yeah.
remember seeing that. So if you do a skin, even 1/16 inch thick balsa sheeting will completely eliminate that. You don't have to worry about the heat from the sun, and you can build it just as light. Yes, you can use carbon fiber and Kevlar and all these other exotic materials, but um, you know, all of these things come down to you have chemical constraints
Yeah.
of what heat is doing with the foam. I mean, even the monster foam, it's the same exact formula as the regular foam. It's just thicker,
Yeah.
and so but whether you use it or not, it doesn't really matter because it's going to have the same chemical reaction. So that's when you have to start getting into these composite builds, and people are like, oh, composite, that's a fancy word. I'm like, well, no, it's just an accurate word that means putting a whole bunch of stuff together to accomplish something different. And that's more or less what I try to do. You know, I use a lot of 3D printing in my builds now because it's a very specific tool to get a very specific result. So I like to call my 3D printer an instrument of building rather than a tool, because it is so much more refined than a hammer.
So, what parts? Speaking of which, because I'm at a dilemma where I want to do my servo mounts in the biplane, and I'm like, do I trust this part? Because I have a bad history with 3D printed planes.
Yeah, you do.
You know, so it's like, wow, this is gonna hold my servo. You know, do I say, okay, this is a great prototyping tool, and then I pass it off to another friend who can make me something that's not going to melt and buckle and everything? Or do I say, okay, let's go full 100% inlay and, you know, and make it as thick and as resilient as possible and go with it, because the alternative is just to, you know, use a piece of wood?
Well, and then there's the balance of the flying philosophy. You know, do you build your models to last, or do you build your models to fly?
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with trying to come up with a compromise for both. But at the same time, if you build a model as light as possible, it's going to fly better. It just is.
Yeah.
And so you get into these materials that are 3D printed. Anytime you get something that is going to be longer lasting and super strong, it's not going to be very light.
Yeah.
And that's the sacrifice that you make, the balance. Exactly. Motor mount. You get a nice metal motor mount, it's going to be super strong, and you're going to be able to hang the whole airplane off the prop, but it's heavy. But frankly, when you do these electric conversions on old gas airplanes, you want that weight up front anyway, so it kind of makes sense. It's like, who cares?
So have you done any combustion fuel aircraft, or are you primarily a battery guy?
It's too messy.
It's too messy?
I like the reliability of electric. I like the cleanliness of electric. I like the lack of paraphernalia. I don't have to bring like half my shop to go fly.
Yeah.
You know, the flight box that I see the guys have at the field, or the starter and the fuel and the
pumps.
chicken stick or the pumps and the glow plugs and all the other stuff. I'm just like, I got a battery box, a transmitter box, a charger box, and any airplane I can imagine. Yeah. Those 3 boxes will fly any airplane that I have, and I don't have to worry about it.
And at the end of the day, you can bring your airplane inside. You don't have to store it.
Exactly. Yeah. I love the sound. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing like a gas radial engine in a scale model. Every single time I experience one, it sends chills down my spine. But I can't afford it, and I don't want to clean it after I fly it.
Yeah. And I look at the cost. I look at the operational cost. But nitro is crazy expensive for the fuel.
It's here. Even here, it's like $34 a gallon at the local hobby store. It's crazy.
Yeah. No, and then you can spin up. You can test your prop in your basement. You're not EDFs. I tend to get in trouble when I fire up an EDF, but that's
It's a really powerful hair dryer.
Oh yeah. And when you forget it's 11 o'clock at night and you got the twin EDFs on an A10. Woo! I'm like, oh, you shoot. All right. So you're wearing a very special T-shirt.
I actually am.
FlightFest flight crew, and this is something that I think was in the workings for a while, and it was interesting because you were quite adamant about FlightLine safety at FlightFest, which was a very serious thing. We had some issues. And I always came back with, how can I combat this? I can't be everywhere at once. And to my absolute surprise, You and Carl stepped up after I kind of initiated the flight crew program and transformed that flight line for me in a rather nice way. But talk us through some of the work that required on your end.
So, I guess I want to preface anything that I say with um, the AMA, the Academy of Model Aeronautics, has an impeccable safety record.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the whole current drone UAS situation that we are encountering right now is bringing that more to the forefront. And I think we should continue to beat that drum. And really what Carl and I did was look at the events that we've gone to that are the traditional AMA sanctioned events. How do they operate? What can we adopt to Flight Fest, which is very, very different.
Special?
I wouldn't call it special. If I were to pick one word to describe the FlightLine experience at Flight Fest, I would say liberating.
Yes. Very valid.
Because
very good.
because you have to completely disregard any inhibition that you would ever have going up to that flight line. I've had so many people, how can you fly your models at Flight Fest? I'm like, they're just models.
Yeah.
If I brought it here, I'm gonna fly it, or at least try to fly it, because the whole point of Flight Fest is to share the experience with everyone else. If you have any sort of inhibition, you shouldn't be there. You shouldn't have that model, or you're not ready for that experience. And so being able to adopt a position of safety on the flight line is very difficult when you have that kind of push to let everything go. We're not trying to say that we're free range parenting, new model pilots here. What we're trying to do is we're trying to shepherd new beginning pilots on how to operate safely in a very chaotic environment. So really what we wanted to just establish, number one, communication. And that was the biggest problem that we had in the past. You had all of these pilots spread over, what is Fury Field? Half a mile long? Seriously, half a mile long?
Yep.
And there are literally pilots from one end to the next, and there are no groupings. There is no way that you can communicate with another person who's 50 feet away from you.
Yeah.
If you've got all of this space, number one, and then there's people in between, and then there's their family right off the flight line having their own conversations, and then there's the music, and then because that happens constantly at Flight Fest. So we wanted to try to first establish communication, and the real main thing that we had to do was we had to do pilot briefings. We had to do the pilot briefings, just get everybody on the same page, make them aware, and try to encourage people to be friends on the flight line. Try to group people on the flight line. That was the other thing. Try to have stations, the vague outline of a pilot station. It's worked, okay? They don't stand at a stake. That's totally fine. Yeah. The idea is to suggest that if you go to an AMA sanctioned event, this will not be foreign to you, and the procedure will be familiar, because a lot of people, the only event they ever go to is Flight Fest. Will say they get more advanced in the hobby, say they do want to branch out and do something different. We want to be able to facilitate them for that next step, not just being at Flight Fest. So then on top of that, we looked at the kind of procedural things. There's a lot of people that just don't know what is a pattern. Fly the pattern, fly the pattern. It's like I heard this story years ago. This mother telling her son, "Don't go down to the corner. It's dangerous. Don't go down to the corner. It's dangerous." Well, the boy gets outside and he's playing in the front yard and his ball rolls away and he goes after the ball and he goes down to the corner and the mother comes up screaming and says, "I've told you so many times not to go down to the corner. Why did you do that?" And the little boy asks at the mom, says, "What's a corner?"
Nice analogy, actually.
You have to remember that a lot of these terms that we take for granted are foreign to other people, and you can't just expect people to know them. You can't just say, "Well, you didn't take the time to learn this term. You should come up to my level." There's nothing wrong with being able to say, "Oh, this person's just never heard this term before. Well, let's teach them. Let's share.
Yep.
Let's have fun along the way."
And then
And
he'll
so
tell
that's
his
what
buddy. And then he'll tell his buddy.
Exactly. So that's what we tried to do, between the pilot briefings and having the people on the flight line say, "That was really great flight, but next time you're coming into land and you've got a dead battery, make sure you're yelling out emergency landing or landing left to right or whatever, so that other people are aware that you're in a critical situation and that they understand." So I think from those main points of communication, everything else was sort of peripheral and just made sense because they were easy to implement. But those kinds of main communication things at an event like Flight Fest were logistically the most difficult.
Mm-hmm. And then, and every year we've taken incremental steps. Every year, incremental, and it's gotten better and better. And it's all right. We'll say it now. We've learned this past week that unfortunately 2020 won't happen due to everything that's going on with COVID-19, which is really unfortunate because we made a lot of strides last year, and from my end of it, my tweaks are very minor, and it was just like okay. And we had more access to more property and everything. So it's really unfortunate, but I guess we'll just rest up and be ready for 21, I suppose.
Exactly. The lesson that I took away from 2019 was that the more people are enjoying themselves on the flight line, the better experience they're going to have doing the things that will make them safer on that flight line. I mean, honest to goodness, it is the most dangerous place to be anywhere on the grounds. Honestly, some of the best memories that you will ever have at a Flight Fest are in those same dangerous spaces. And that's why we want to try to, have people there on the line say, "Okay, you're going to do this big sketchy build. I understand you're excited, but let's at least check to make sure your control surfaces are right. Let's at least do the bare basic things to make sure that, in the excitement of everything, you're going to somewhat be safe."
Yeah.
Just, that kind of reality check where a lot of AMA events, you're not allowed to do made flights.
No.
And again, this is different. The whole point of Flight Fest is the build tents, and then you take the airplane out to the flight line and you make a memory. And we want to continue to promote that, but at the same time, you have to be able to take a breath, roll your shoulders back, relax, and say, "Let's have a plan.
Yeah.
Let's do this right and make sure that everybody can enjoy this and make sure everybody goes home with all their fingers and toes."
Yep. And, a good run out to the field with a fire extinguisher every once in a while.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for anybody who's never, anybody listening to this podcast probably knows what Flight Fest is, but exactly as Joshua has explained, we're the old guys at the field, ironically enough. I think the average age last year was ungodly low, which is amazing. And the idea of, a kid running out of the thing, hasn't run up his prop or anything inside the building or anything, and just gets out and throws the thing and goes flying is amazing. And every year we've been able to, upgrade and upgrade. And as we get more people coming in, and as we I guess, as the volunteers become more savvy, we're able to recruit and figure out, where I can position people, and, we can bring stuff to the front that we want to. I mean, we're always talking about, we want to have this thing. We want to have pilots that are there to help the young pilots go and everything, but can't facilitate that yet. But that's coming. That's right. Coming. Every year, something like that is coming. Phone Boy RC says, how are you guys going to deal with the Flight Fest being canceled? The reality is pretty simple. A lot of people are talking about, stuff into later in the year. A lot of us are just going to, if we can fly at home, we'll fly at home. But we don't know yet. We don't know what June is going to bring. We don't know what July is going to bring, right? Every state, every province, every country is dealing with it on their own ways and everything. So it's I don't know yet. I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't even think I'm going to book my vacation time anymore.
Yeah, that's the situation I'm in. So my company was purchased by another company, and so as part of the transition from one to the other, I've got all of this leave that I have to use up before the end of this year. But I have to use the new company leave before I can use the old company leave, and I'm just like, I can't use leave for anything right now.
Yeah, what's the point?
What am I gonna do?
Yeah,
I'm gonna take leave and stay at home.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. That's exactly it. So I'm like, oh well, I'll bank it up and everything. Who knows how it's all gonna go? I mean, I was asked, and my end of it, I'm like, I don't even know if I'll be able to, cross the border or anything like that. So it's not even a concern right now. So the gist of that is we will do what we can when we can. I'm laughing here because I'm sitting here. I wish I could put this on camera. I got a cat inside my 3D printer. It's horrifying. Yeah, she's
I'm actually checking for my cat. Sometimes he ventures down here.
Oh my. So yeah, I'm earlier in the week, I was pretty beat up. It was a pretty hard message. It was a message that I knew that was coming. It was a message that I knew had to come. Even if it was going to happen in July, there was some speculation that I wouldn't have been able to attend anyhow. So from a accessing the border standpoint, could I actually legitimately take off, and be offline for 2 weeks? Because of the quarantine stuff afterwards, or was I just in general going to risk my own health and safety, unknowing? So, yeah. Now enough with that.
Way too many variables on that one.
Way too many variables, particularly for me, and it's not fun being clumped into that high risk category either. Do I look like high risk? Yeah. It's unfortunate I am. All right, so enough of that downer. We're gonna get into the hot seat questions. Are you up to some hot seat questions, man?
Sure.
All right.
Why not?
We'll do that. We'll talk about some other stuff. If any of you guys, thanks guys for the Flight Fest memories and laughing with everybody. Yeah, you too, Bob. I'm like I said earlier in the week, man. I'm pissed. I can't see my friends, and that is a legitimate statement. I'm just firing up my computer here with all the questions. All right. So we have about 40 plus questions. It's working. The bell. Short, cute little answers. We can elaborate if we will. But okay, good. So, okay, Bill, I'll get to that question after. Bill's asking a good one too, because it's another reason I'm bummed about no July. Okay. Question number 28 to start off with. Line of sight or FPV? Has Joshua Orchard even have you ever FPV'd? Have you ever flown FPV?
Once.
Yeah? And?
I'm a line of sight pilot.
Cool. I can respect that. I fly FPV very rarely. It's like the lowest, because I'm always annoyed with having to ask someone to spot for me. But I do enjoy it. What was the
I don't know why. I just don't have any interest in it. I don't have anything against it. I think it's cool technology. It's just I don't have any interest.
That's fair.
Never have.
That's fair. What mode of pilot? 1, 2, 3, 4.
2.
2. Good stuff. So you can hand a remote off to someone, no problem. Nice.
Yep. And I actually trim my airplanes too.
What? What is that? Trimming an airplane. Let's go. All right. Question number 4. Tell us your best crash.
Ooh, best crash. All right, so my best crash is probably 2012, maybe 2011. I can't remember. Long time ago. I had just gotten back into the hobby and I had done my first scale build. It's an airplane from a company called Aerodrome RC. Model is called an O1 Tummelisa. The O has an umlaut. It's from Sweden. I love Swedish airplanes. Very interesting aviation history in Sweden. If you haven't read it up, it's great. But yeah, crashed that airplane at an event onto a paved runway.
Oh yeah, that'll do it.
It was absolutely amazing. I remember it to this day because I remember the airplane coming down, and it looked like the balsa had just gone liquid. just
Yeah.
It was amazing. A couple months later, I had it rebuilt, and I've flown it since, and yeah, loved that airplane. Love that airplane.
Nice. Actually, Bill Decker asked what was the airplane I'd bring across. So I will. That's why I'm annoyed, because you go into the States, I get to bring it back across the border. There's no taxes and there's no shipping. I don't know if it would have been a third flex airplane. That was a possibility. I don't know if I would have picked up the Bronco from Motion, or if I was going to go for a Hangar 9, because that's something I've been talking about or itching about. Hildeflyer asks, what was the most the wettest flight fest? I want to say
Wettest?
15.
I want to say 15.
That was
because that was rain every single day.
Yeah.
So every single day there were times when people weren't flying because of rain. There have been like monsoon-like rainstorms on an individual day that made the event kind of frustrating because of mud, but I would say 15 was definitely the wettest.
Yeah, that was the big year we pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed cars out. Yeah. It's been,
and that was the year that I spent building the Sikorsky. So,
oh yeah,
I was dry the whole
time. Yeah,
I had my corner of a build tent.
Question 39: are you a bank and yank, or do you coordinate your turns?
I coordinate.
Of course, turns. You fly with rudder. The planes you fly need it anyhow.
That's true. That's true. And I try to fly them in a scale way, so I kind of require it in order to do that. In order to make it look like it's a scale model, you have to fly it like a real airplane.
Well, and the majority of your airplanes are probably tail draggers, right?
Yeah, I would say so. But scale airplanes, they somewhat behave like a scale manner, so you kind of have to use the rudder. The Sikorsky requires it. It's not going to do a bank and yank. It won't do it. It's too much drag on it, and a number of other airplanes are the same way. The GB, the GB, you have to fly with rudder. If you think you're going to fly a GB with bank and yank, you're kidding yourself.
Because it'll just corkscrew itself, I guess.
Well, the tail wants to slide around because there's very little vertical surface area, so you have to stay on the rudder for a GB, and that's what I say to everybody. If you go down and look at the math and the aerodynamics of a GB, there's a reason why you crashed it, because you didn't respect the aerodynamics of it. You have to fly those airplanes with rudder. You just have to.
It's funny because I think I mentioned this in the last show. Last fall I'd been tearing it up with the jets, so tricycle gear, and then I break out the Grand Tundra, and I ground loop the thing within the first 30 seconds. I'm like, oh right. I gotta control the rudder on this big thing, because as soon as you power it up and the wing catches it, and I'm like, oh wow, just you got to remember to do all that stuff. So, yeah. All right.
Yeah, it's just like riding a bike. It comes back.
Oh, yeah. I'm on 26, 22. What was your first car?
Oh, you don't even want to know. Don't even
Come
want to
on,
know.
come on.
Okay. So let's qualify the question. First car I drove or first car that I owned?
Owned. Yeah.
Oh, Pontiac Grand Prix. It's
Nice. Nice.
nothing special at all. It
Nice.
did have the 3.8 liter V6, so
Not bad. Not bad motor. Yeah. All right. What is your favorite favorite all-time RC experience? Something that you will always cherish.
that one's really, really hard. There's so many that I have for very, very, very different reasons. Um, um, Probably one that I would definitely say is one for the record books is the very first Flight Fest, where
14.
we,
Yep.
we yeah, we did the giant FT flyer in the Fury hangar, and then we maidened it at 2 o'clock in the
In the morning.
morning, and then we slept for like all of maybe 4 hours, and got up and we were trying to find another motor because we had smoked the motor on the maiden flight. Yeah, I mean he's
Yep. Yep.
that's such an amazing thing to just like spur of the moment, just dig in and build something with a whole bunch of people, and then you're laughing and having a good time. You're being silly because you're tired and you're hungry, and I don't want to go to the bathroom because I gotta get this finished built. This is our last day
Yep.
before we have to leave this amazing event, and then just share it with so many people was an amazing experience to just share such a wonderful memory with so many wonderful people.
So, prefacing that, is your experience within the flight test community is that something that's changed you?
Um, I think the short answer is an obvious yes. Just because before I had my flight test friends, I really didn't have many close friends, like at all. I had acquaintances, I had coworkers. I'm a very unique individual, but I think the community of flight test gathers a group of people that are understanding and accepting of you, who you are, without any predisposition or supposition. I think that is one of the amazing things about the community, that when people outside come in, or even just on look, they are struck in awe at how amazingly different and complicated we are, but we love each other
Mm.
no matter what happens. And I think that you can't help but be changed by this community once you go in head first and you fully commit. You're going to be fully committed. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yes, 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 and it's a community that doesn't let you go. It's special that way. So cool. All
Yeah.
right, we'll ask a couple more questions here, and then we'll jump into we'll jump into some of the new products, and then I think we'll have a really nice show. This was a good one as a builder. Belly lander or landing gear?
Uh, is it a model that I care about?
Oh, that's tough. That's tough.
I would have to say landing gear, just because to me that's part of the complication of landing and taking off. Is your landing gear going to hold? Well, did you build it right? That's sort of a test of me as a builder. Did I build it? Did I build the landing gear right? But there is something to be said about plopping down a belly lander, and you're just like, yep, that was carrier deck. That looks great. you know. Um, And generally those kinds of airplanes, I mean, I've got the Durafly Buffalo, and I just don't care about that airplane. And
Yeah.
every time it lands, just like it works,
Yeah.
it's on the
Yeah.
ground.
It's on the ground. I didn't break the prop. Yeah.
Yep, yep.
Name someone who changed your view of the hobby.
Ooh, there's so many. Uh, Former coworker of mine. His name's John. Respect his privacy, so I'm not going to give his last name. But John is the guy who really got me back into the hobby. And he is the guy who brilliantly lit up my brain with this idea of composite building. He was in the hobby and built sailplanes, and he just explained to me about composite building, and I couldn't get enough, and so I just started, like, profusely reading about composite building. Completely changed my outlook on building. All my approaches. It was just like, yes, anything you can think of is worth trying at least once.
Cool.
So, John, thank you.
Nice. Nicely put. All right. 43. I really like this question. If you had to fly the same plane for 6 months, what would you fly?
Plane in my hangar or not in my hangar?
Doesn't have to be in your hangar.
Ooh, not in my hangar. Okay. Uh, that would be a Jerry Bates 100-inch wingspan SB2C Helldiver.
Helldiver. Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
a nice giant scale dive bomber, traditionally built. It's a beautiful airplane. It's an oddball. Great conversation. Great technical. Great history. Just great plane. Yeah,
Cool.
easily.
And you got a thing for the bombers as well, right? You've had a few.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I really enjoy the history about dive bombing and bombing in general. Uh, Developments and some really interesting history about it.
Cool. All right, we're gonna jump into some of the new releases. I think there's only 3 on the books right now, so we'll flip over to the website. There we go. All right. So this one popped up recently, and I admit I'm interested. It is the UMX from E-flite, the UMX Citation. So we're talking a little 3S, 2S or 3S, little UMX, twin motor, EDF. They claim it's their most powerful UMX EDF so far. 3S800s? So that's actually pretty cool because I've got a whole bunch of those. With a JSD connector, I'm like, oh, that would so be turned to an XT30 like right away, man. But
oh no, this one's interesting. Okay, so the fan size, that's the thing that's interesting to me. When was the last time you heard of a fan size of 30 millimeters?
30 millimeters.
Not very often, not very often. And it brings to mind another great builder, Keith Sparks. He's got a design for, I think it's a B-52? No, maybe it's a Buff.
Okay.
Oh, I can't. Anyway, he was looking around for 8 30 millimeter EDFs, and the only ones he could find were these Hobby King ones. But you had to order them for like different warehouses because they didn't stock enough of them in the U.S. to get 8 of them, and ended up like, oh my gosh, yeah. So 30 millimeter. I think if they're bringing that kind of fan with that kind of performance to the market, I think
Yeah.
that's a great parts airplane. That's the way I'm looking at that right now.
Well,
That's a great parts airplane.
we a couple of years ago when the guys were up here flying with me, my buddy Dave Rayner bought the A10, and that nose, just like the flight test guys, that nose lasted all of like 10 seconds before it was shattered. So I'm kind of curious to see how this airplane endures. Like all their UMX aircraft, the gear is removable.
It's got a light set too.
Yeah, it's a cute little airplane, and those fan blades, man, they look. You can't tell me they don't look like a little like your Inductrix. They really, to me, yeah,
Oh, you're right. I mean, it is a six-blade fan,
yeah.
but you're very right.
It's a brushless motor, right? But like if it flies, and I mean, I watched the video and everything. I was like, geez, you know. So this is, I admit, this thing is fully on my shelf only because I've got a bunch of those. Flight Test was selling those 3S 800s, and I use them on a bunch of my quads and a bunch of my smaller airplanes. But totally, put an XT30 connector on there, and you know, it's got their AS3X, and I'm with you on the smaller airplanes on the UMXs. Love it. Love it.
Yeah,
I've learned to really enjoy it. Was it 170 US? That's not bad at all.
that's not
And if
bad.
it handles
Really
it, it
not.
looks nice. It's a really striking, nice looking airplane. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I like how they integrated the winglets too. That's a nice touch because you don't often see a nice smooth transition in winglet, especially like an ultra micro size. It's a really, really nice touch.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, you can even see some of the photos. There's like some creasing and some spots here and there. This is probably
Yeah,
this is probably a plane that you transport in its box. I think
yeah, probably.
it's probably a safe bet. My Tundra has got some dings and bents on it, but generally I don't even put it in the box anymore because that's the problem with the boxes and the UMXs. They take up so much space. I
Yeah.
was thinking about getting the from my great hobbies here in Ottawa, the Waco, just because, you know, but
Hmm.
we'll see. I can't fly it, so So, the next one I wanted to point out from Horizon, actually FMS, is I'm sorry, it's an EDF. The Avanti version 3 70 mil. So I'll have to look into see what they've done. It looks pretty good. It's the Avanti is it's just one of those shapes it's a performance jet, but it's engineered really well as far as a flying jet goes, because it's a sports jet and they've taken the time to actually make it work. And obviously V3, I want to see what it was. What did they put into it? V3 nose to tail with no overlooked, retaining the plug type wing harnesses, screwed together assembly, all terrain tires, plastic and carbon fiber components. Yeah, it looks like a nice looking jet. Spec wise, what did it say for battery? So they've upgraded
Success.
well, yeah, obviously they've upgraded the ESC, which they've been doing. They now basically run the Hobbywing 80 amp on across the board, which is a really nice really nice ESC. They've upgraded the motor, obviously, and it is a 12 blade 70 mil, so it has to make a beautiful sound. Metal
Yeah, the
gears.
whoosh.
Yes, yeah, and it takes battery. Will it tell me what it wants? I don't see what's battery
Specs.
it wants. It doesn't say it under specs.
Mm-hmm.
All right, parts and accessory. Come on, come on. It doesn't say. Anyhow, it's too. I guess it's just too new. But
Yeah, they're not even recommending a size for you to buy.
it's probably a
Hmm.
5,000.
Interesting.
It's probably a 6S 5,000. But either way, it looks neat. It's colorful. Decent price.
Yeah.
You know, and it's you know, you can get a UMX or you can go and get a full size jet. So it's and again, this is not a bind and fly or anything like this. This is when you slap in your own receiver. I tend to run something I can run telemetry on it. And the only other one that I want to talk about is this interesting aircraft from FlightLine, the Bronco. I'll probably try and get Alpha on the upcoming podcast to have a discussion with it. I admit this one was in my shopping cart. This one was pretty serious. I'm a sucker for 4S twin props. What can I say? And it looks good. It's kind of a fun looking aircraft, you know, stubby wings and everything. I'm sure it transports pretty nice. The wings come off and everything. But I think shipping for me was like 85 US. You guys in the US, you are so darn lucky. So darn lucky. I was like, well, I'm not going to pay another $100 just to have the thing shipped. It looks good. What is interesting is you look at the parts gear, and they've sourced I think the nose gear is off their Avanti and stuff like this. So they haven't gone and completely built from the ground up or anything. They looked at their materials and the gear they had in stock, and they incorporated it into the aircraft. And it's just that plucky. I love this aircraft. I love the look of it, the twin cockpit, the plucky wings and everything. It's just a fun looking airplane. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see who gets them. They're going to come out in June. It's still on pre-order. And $379, which is in line with anything they've ever posted. So it's Lee Davis says it's not his kind of thing. So it's but Bill Deckard, I knew he was pre-ordering one. He had told me he was going to be going after one. I think it's probably a pretty good aircraft for going around. But I've got my E-flite EC-1500. And I think it's going to fly exactly the same as this thing. And, so it's, what do you want out of a 4S twin? But it looks neat. It's got some pretty neat landing gear. I don't know how rugged those gear would be based on some landing. But, I mean, without the ordnance on board, I'm sure you can grease the thing and come in really smooth.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's got a big Hershey bar wing. It's going to fly great just because that Motion is putting in great research into their flight characteristics. We know that from Alpha's conversations before. It's going to fly great. It looks great too. It's not something I would personally own, but if I were to see it at the field, I would appreciate it for sure.
Nice. Lee says in his hangars he wants an Arrows MiG-29. Oh yeah, I could see one of those. I'll fly one over the border. Bill Decker says. Bill, I would so appreciate that. So those are the only ones. I haven't checked any of the other manufacturers or any other suppliers really. It's kind of been a slow week. I suspect you're going to see a lot of manufacturers. I'm wondering if the UMX class. It's call me prediction. I'm gonna put this out. If this keeps going on the way we're going, I think you're gonna see a lot of smaller aircraft. You're gonna see a lot of the bigger aircraft wait. They're gonna come in, but they're not gonna go on sale because I think a lot of the manufacturers are going to wait this stuff out. You're probably gonna see a whole slew of smaller airplanes, maybe, and then a ton of ground aircraft or ground vehicles. Sorry. So who knows? Joshua, any last points and comments? Anything last subject you want to bring up?
Go build something.
Yeah, totally. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what you're using, whatever material. There is no correct answer. It's just, don't be afraid to try stuff. Pick your budget. Pick your budget and live within that. And I think you can just have all kinds of fun. Designing aircraft is hilariously entertaining for whatever reason. I remember some of my earlier builds. Now it's like, wow, that worked. So it's you figure it out.
And that's the best thing that you could attitude that you could possibly tell anyone too. Don't be afraid to try something. If it seems expensive, find a cheaper way. There's always a way to accomplish something that someone else has done in a more cost-effective way, and that's what I have found.
Yeah.
Achieving the same results at a lower cost, that's great. But share it with other people, get other people on board, because it's the only way that you're going to help other people. It's the only way that you're going to get other people to say, okay, well, really, we can do this less. And it brings everything down to a more approachable price point. But I just like you're approaching cutting a battery hatch with a razor saw, don't be afraid to take the first cut. Try something new. The worst that's going to happen is you're going to fail and you're going to learn something from it.
And it's wood. You can fix that easy enough.
Exactly.
So yes, check out Joshua's Instagram feed, his YouTube channel. They are in the show notes. So be sure to check out some of his videos. He's doing a real he's doing a better job of doing videos than I am lately. But he's having fun. It's good on you, man. It's good on you. So Yes, and to all the Patreons, thank you everybody for your support. I owe a whack of you guys those awesome stickers. We're working on that. I'll talk to John again for the U.S. ones, my Canadian friends. I will do what I can. Again, I'm still out of stamps and need to get to the post office, and we'll start shipping some out. And same thing with the international people. So that is the end of our podcast. It's been really fun. Woo! That was a bad audio edit on my part. But Joshua, thank you, sir. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for being patient.
Thanks for having me.
You know, we'll we'll keep talking. We'll get there. We'll keep flying on to have some fun with the flight simulator and everything. So
absolutely.
Have yourself a fantastic evening. Thank you very much. See everybody later. Bye.
Bye.